going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I'm bringing to you my SPYRAL deck profile that I took to day 2 at YCS San Diego. Now, before you hit the dislike button and before you leave the video, I want to talk a lot about the theory behind the event, as well as more so meta application rather than the deck itself, because let's be real, we all know SPYRAL's what it does and why it's good, but I want to discuss some of my theory behind it, some of the matchups that took place, and kind of overall why I ended up choosing this deck. So going into YCS San Diego, I was trying to think of how can I play a deck that can play a lot of hand traps to combat SPYRAL while also still playing a very strong deck. And, you know, I actually contemplated playing Burning Abyss for a while, and I also contemplated Trickstar, but ultimately I settled on SPYRAL because it's the strongest engine, but also, even though it's super fragile, can play the hand traps to combat SPYRAL itself. And I mentioned this in my last video, SPYRAL Sleeper is an absolutely bomb of a card that a lot of decks have a lot of difficulty dealing with, and that was a card that rode me to a lot of my victories, and I think a lot of SPYRAL players would also agree with that. So I'm going to go into the profile, but I'm going to discuss some of the theory behind the deck as well, because I did stuff that was a little bit different than some SPYRAL players might expect. So starting off with the list, this is really good because if you are a SPYRAL player, this is going to give you some insight into my thinking, but if you're not a SPYRAL player and you're looking for ways to combat the deck, this is going to give you some insight on how SPYRAL players are thinking, so you can use that knowledge to kind of prepare your counter strategy if you have a regional, or maybe you're going to YCS Prague or Argentina in the coming weeks. So we have 3 Super Agent. I mean, this is pretty much standard at this point because you need to just max out on your ability to get 2 SPYRAL monsters onto the board. Then just for the 1-ofs, the 1 Quick Fix, the 1 Drone, Sleeper, Last Resort, and Master Plan. So one thing that was different about my deck is I actually opted to blind second, which means that going into the first game of every round, I let my opponent go first whether or not I won the die roll. And the reason for that is because, we'll get to that in a little bit, but statistically, I had a higher percentage of opening a hand trap than my opponent does of opening the SPYRAL combo, meaning I can hand trap them, stop them from doing their combo, and then I can proceed to hopefully kill them on my turn, plus I get the additional draw for going second, which gives me an extra combo piece and can help me just finish off my opponent. And with the fact that I did end up going to day 2, it actually worked for me rather well. Now, I didn't play SPYRAL Tough, which if you're playing a go second build, I think playing SPYRAL Tough definitely would make sense in retrospect, and there would be a couple cards I would probably cut for SPYRAL Tough just to make going second even easier, so that is something I regret not playing in the main deck. I did consider side decking it, but I ultimately decided not to, but we'll get to that when we get to the side deck. So that's it for the main SPYRAL monsters. We'll just get those out of the way. Now moving on, so for the hand traps, we played 3 copies of Droll and Lockbird. This is basically mandatory because SPYRAL is the best deck, and this literally says end your turn to SPYRAL. Then we played 3 copies of Ash Blossom. Ash Blossom is probably the best all-around hand trap just because it has so much flexibility in what it can hit. We also played 3 copies of Reaper in the main. Now, Reaper was a meta call because I was anticipating a lot of SPYRAL. Now, the thing is, this is really good because if I go second, if I'm able to Reaper their double helix going second, not only does that mean they can't go into double helix, but it also means that if they're playing Reaper, they can't Reaper my helix because I already banished all of theirs out of their extra deck, and that's actually a really big deal. Now, the thing is, you might think this might not have, you know, some other good applications, but the fact that you can hit Baguska in Pendulum Magician means they can't go into that, which is very strong. And I also played some other targets for it in the extra deck, which we'll get into a little bit later. Then we also played the 1 Max C and the 1 DD Crow. So Max C, obviously, it's Max C. But DD Crow is something I do regret playing, mainly because, yeah, it's good against SPYRAL because you can hit the Quick Fix and it kind of ends the combo. But unless they open the Quick Fix combo, DD Crow isn't exactly that powerful. And outside of that, it doesn't really have a really good amount of application. Like, yeah, I did banish a Trickstar Reincarnation once or twice, which was pretty nice, but other than that, it really didn't do much outside of that, and because I was blinding second, I felt that this could have been something that would have been an excellent substitute for at least 1 copy of SPYRAL Tough. So that's it for the monsters. One thing you guys might question is why I didn't play Gamma. So the reason I didn't play Gamma is because Gamma's really only powerful against Droll and Lockbird, which is fine, but the issue is as you get to the higher tables, your opponent's not going to Droll you unless you have a monster on the field field to counteract from getting hit by Gamma. Now, I did that once where I Droll knocked my opponent and they Gamma'd me and they automatically won the game. So I probably could have stolen some wins, but I knew once I got to the later tables, people weren't going to fall for that. So I decided that Gamma was actually going to be a dead card as I got later on. I know some people opted for Gamma, but in this personal meta, or this specific meta, I personally didn't, I didn't really like Gamma. But if you think Gamma is appropriate, absolutely, you can go ahead and go for it. Moving on to the spells, 3 copies of Resort. It's obvious it's your field spell. We play the 3 Terraforming to get us there. 3 copies of Double Summon and 3 copies of Foolish Burial Goods. Now, the reason I played all 6 of these is because I wanted to maximize the chance for me to open the combo, whether I was going first or even just to give me a little bit of some extension plays going second, because Foolish Burial Goods basically either says Monster Reborn or Special Summon from the hand, and Double Summon allows me to just get more monsters onto the field. So if I removed one of these, it actually lowers your percentage of opening the combo by about 4 to 5%, and I felt that was actually rather significant, so I wanted to max out on these. You could maybe play like 1 less goods, but again, I was actually really happy with these. There were some times where it was a little bit cloggy, but ultimately, like, you can maybe cut 1 if you're really feeling it, but I was pretty happy with it overall. And then for the 1-ofs, 1 Foolish, 1-for-1, Rhoda, Gear, Big Red, and Assault. So Assault is just a 1-of for goods. You don't play more. Big Red is, again, a 1-of. You could play 2, but I feel like you only want the 1 just to search with Quick Fix. Rhoda is, again, to get to Super Agent, and you could potentially get to Tough if you're running that as well. 1-for-1 is just pretty much auto-win if they don't stop it. And Foolish Burial is good because it gets Quick Fix in the graveyard, meaning you can resurrect it with Big Red, or with Rescue that you dump with Foolish Burial Goods, or do a lot of cool things with it. I really liked Foolish Burial in this deck. I actually considered cutting at one point, but I decided not to for the event, and I was very happy that I didn't, because there were several instances where I needed Foolish Burial to actually get me there. Now, moving on to the traps, 2 copies of Spiral Rescue. This is something that I also probably could have cut to 1 for a second Spiral Tough, because again, since I was blinding second, the chance of me going into the combo wasn't very high, so I feel like I only needed the 1 Rescue, and there was a lot of instances where I had this in my opening hand, and it wasn't really going to do me anything, so if this were a Tough instead, it would have put in a lot more work. So again, if you're going first, and that's what you're planning on, 2 Mission is probably, or excuse me, 2 Rescue is probably fine, but if you're going second like I was doing, you can probably cut this for maybe a Spiral Tough or just another card just overall in general. And last but not least, we were main decking 3 copies of Evenly Matched. I was borrowing the 3rd one, shoutouts to Adam for letting me borrow that, but I was maining 3 copies of Evenly Matched, bringing the total to 41 cards in the main deck. So again, this was good because since I was blinding second, didn't matter what I was playing. If I drew Evenly Matched, I basically just flat out won, except for the instance of 1 game where that was the case, just because my opponent didn't fully overextend like most of my opponents would going first. This was just amazing. Having this going into game 1 and blinding second just took so many of my opponents off guard and really just won me so many games. Evenly Matched is just absurd. If this card isn't in your main or your side deck, it's not mandatory, but I mean, against Pendulum, against Rogue, like, there's not many decks outside of like Trickstar and Spiral that can really deal with this card effectively, so it was just an MVP all day. So like I said, that was 41 cards in the main deck. Moving on to the extra deck, we've got 2 copies of Double Helix. 2 is really all you need. Some people play 3 because the combo requires you to use 2, and so you want to have a 3rd one for a follow-up play if need be. Honestly, the game never got to that point for me that I needed a 3rd, but obviously, it's definitely a choice you can make. It does make you more susceptible to Reaper as well, because if they Reaper your Helix, then that's just 1 extra slot you could have used, just gone to waste. Then we have the 1 Proxy Dragon, again, just generic link 2. 1 Ib, I actually never summoned Ib the entire day, but it's just there in case you need it. 1 Ningirsu, so Ningirsu is actually a card I almost cut, but it actually came up once where it was very, very useful, and that's why I decided to keep it in there. I only used probably 11 cards in my extra deck, and this was when I was considered cutting for another Cherries target, but ultimately I decided this card can out things that this deck naturally can't out, so having the Ningirsu is actually very, very viable. Decode Talker, I probably made that every single game. Tri-Gate Wizard I only made twice when I was doing full combo, but it's still definitely necessary. 2 Firewalls, I don't think 2 Firewalls is necessary. You can probably just play 1 and play something else in place of the other. Maybe just another Cherries target if you're going with my build, or just something else in general. 1 copy of Borreload. Borreload is just like an absolute game ender in some circumstances. You can steal your opponent's sleeper. You can just take things that you shouldn't be able to take with this card. It's completely unfair, and plus it out your opponent's Borreload as well, so that's very important. Moving on to the XCs, 1 Recital Starling and 1 Princess Sprite. Again, I did use the DD Crow in some instances, so this was good, but if you're not playing DD Crow, you don't need to play the Recital Starling. You can play the Ghost Trick Monster instead, just as another level 1, because you do want to have 2. And then we had the Baguska as well, because not only did I make this twice, but I also used it to Reaper against Pendulum Magician, so that was the theory anyway. I actually didn't get to do that because I only played 1 Pendulum Magician the entire tournament. Now rounding out the extra deck, 1 Dante and 1 Dragon Buster. So Dante obviously for cherries for Burning Abyss, because that deck's gotten a lot of hype recently and I just wanted to have nothing to do with it. And Dragon Buster was a meta call because, like I said in my meta analysis, because this deck has been kind of under the radar, some people might think to play the deck, so I wanted to just have the Buster in there just in case, just so I have as a precaution. I already was playing the Reaper, so I'm like, you know, I don't have anything else I want to play in my extra deck, so I might as well just play the Dragon Buster. So now moving on to the side deck, 3 copies of Magical Spring. This in tandem with Evenly Matched going up against Pendulum Magician can just be an absolute blowout. Now, to be fair, against my 1 Pendulum match, I Magical Springed him, I didn't draw into Evenly Matched, and I lost, but in theory, this card is basically just Graceful Charity going up against a Pendulum match, and then you draw Evenly Match, you destroy their entire board, and then you're so far ahead that they're not going to be able to recover. So the theory was there, but when it got to the actual tournament itself, it didn't get me there. But that's okay, I still like the card overall. 3 copies of Twin Twister. You side these in against just like Trickstar for 1. That's really important to hit their back row. But really just for like Rogue in general, anything that you just need to hit back row, Twin Twister's there. It was always going in for Trickstar, like I said, but just anything else really that just plays a lot of back row. I guess Paleo or anything that might play Skill Drain against you, Twin Twister's pretty good for. 1 Dark Hole, 1 Raigeki. So I decided to go with this because I was opting maybe to play Spiral Tough instead, but I decided, well, if I'm going to play Spiral Tough, I could just play the board wipes, which are just as powerful, even though they're not searchable, but they have a much bigger impact. And these actually came up a lot. These actually won me a couple games, so I'm glad I went with them. Then for the traps, we played 3 copies of Sanctum and 1 Scythe. These cards going up against the Mirror in Spiral are phenomenal. It's just like if they try to target Sanctum, they just go so minus, and then Scythe basically just says end their turn like Droll Unlock. Very, very good set of cards. And then we played 3 copies of Scolding. These basically just win in any time I went first, so that way I could not get evenly matched, or basically just had another line of defense to basically stop any of my opponent's plays, in addition to having more protection for Sleeper and things like that. So guys, that's it for the deck profile overall. Like I said, I went 5-2-1 at the end of day 1, which means I technically made day 2, even though I didn't have a chance of topping just because of the way the rounds were, just the way the tournament was structured and the rounds were laid out. But I had an absolute blast nonetheless, and it was a pleasure meeting each and every one of you that I saw at YCS San Diego. So until next time, guys, let me know down in the comments what you guys think. Thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you found this video helpful, consider backing me on Patreon, because just by pledging only $1 a month, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. I've got a fun video coming at you guys tomorrow, so you don't want to miss it, and we'll see you next time.